Boom. Aaron Powell, I have hit the record button, which means not only have you been a Shark Tank participant, you're a real life entrepreneur, you're a founder, you're a CEO, but now, my brother, you are a Texas Titan. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Absolutely, man. Well, I want to dive right into this, okay? Because we were just talking a little bit offline, getting to speak to someone like you, an entrepreneur, someone who you're on vacation, you're in Sweden with your family, you see something, you get an idea, and not only do you just go, "Oh, that's a good idea," but you bring it back to the States and go, "I'm going to start a company. I'm going to do this. I see a market, I see a need," and you execute on it. So here's what I would like to do is just take us back to kind of I tell you what, I'm going to change direction before we do that. Take us back to before the trip to Sweden, because you don't just, I believe entrepreneurship is in one's DNA for the most part. There's usually traces of it from way back. So tell me kind of before your trip to Sweden, and you find a bike that you like the culture, and then all of a sudden it becomes a business idea. So start where you want to and take us along that journey that led to this business.
Yeah, I think we got to go quite a ways back because there's so many things that kind of culminated in the why was I in Sweden in the first place? It's
Fantastic.
like it's this whole journey, right?
Yeah.
So, I'll even take you back to school. So, like, I grew up in Sugar Land, Houston area, and I knew from a very early age that like music was going to be my thing. My parents had me on piano lessons from like age 5. My parents were both music minors in college, and so it was like I was kind of surrounded by it always. I was in the school band, I was in the school orchestra, and like I knew from like 9th grade that I'm going to be a band teacher. I had a very inspiring band teacher at the time, and that was like my life path, and I put everything into it, practicing hours a day, and like I'm going to be this musician, right? I went to University of North Texas in Denton, just to study music, and I majored in music education. It's one of the best and biggest music schools in the country.
Absolutely.
And that's how I started my career. I actually was a band teacher I taught high school band in Midlothian, did the whole thing, marching band, football games, contests at a 5A school and everything. And then somewhere along the way, like the goal changed because life happens to you. And so, a couple of years, I'm like, okay, I wanted to be this high school band teacher, but the reality of living this life is that I'm having to sacrifice a lot to make this happen. And I've always been a guy, like whatever I'm going to do, I want to be the best at. And I quickly saw that all the best band teachers had like crumbling family lives and like no personal lives whatsoever because they're always at school before and after school for practice. And, my wife's feeling neglected because I'm never at home. It's like, I don't think I can do this for the long term. I'm 2 years into it. I don't think I can do it. So, I switched to teaching middle school, which were, the hours were a lot better, but I don't really like teaching middle school kids as much. So, it's just not as fulfilling for me. And so it's like, I was kind of torn, like, I don't know if this is what I want to do forever, but I don't know anything else. It's like, I've been on this track since age 5 and now I'm 20 years into it. And it's like, I'm kind of disillusioned. So, that's kind of where I was. And then like, it all happened like the day my daughter was born. It was like this switch literally just flipped in my head. And all of a sudden, all of my life priorities were just different. I saw her face and it was like, I don't want to be at school with everyone else's kids all day long and not ever get to be with my own kid, Yep. And so like that moment, I was like, I don't want to be a teacher anymore. That was when I decided, like that instant, it was crazy. And so, I called my principals, like I'm going to take a 90-day maternity leave, and I'm going to figure out how to start a business. I gotta do something. And I'd always been on the side, hustling. I would actually go buy phones on Craigslist, fix them up, sell them on Amazon. Like I was always making extra money to pay down my student loans. So I was always kind of entrepreneurial, but never had thought about, hey, maybe I could start a business, right? But here it was like, I need to start a business so that I have the freedom to spend time at home with my kids. And, and I had there was this, community based kind of kicked off by, Tim Ferriss and the 4-Hour Work Week, and kind of leveraging systems and automation and the internet to make your business work for you. And this was kind of this lifestyle, like I had kind of visualized in my mind, like, okay, I want this business that is just running and I can just spend this time with my family and I don't have to like, I don't have to balance things. I can do what I want, have this freedom. I can be location independent. I could do anything from anywhere in the world. Like, this was my goal. And so while on that maternity leave, I was I was just looking for products, unmet needs on Amazon or, online, where there was a high demand product where there wasn't a lot of people selling it. And I had all of these boxes I was trying to check. And I kind of stumbled across this amber jewelry niche, this imported amber jewelry that was like this trend that was really about to take off. And so I basically just found a manufacturer, imported like, $200 worth of amber necklaces from Lithuania, just a sample, and just threw them up on Amazon. Hey, maybe I'll sell one or two. That'd be awesome. I'll be on my way. Well, the first day I sold 30 necklaces, and then 3 days I sold out the whole thing. And I was
Really?
like, oh my God, like I got to get like as many as I can, like as fast as possible. And so I don't know, I was just in the right place, right time with that, and just rode this wave. And, basically I would teach, I'd come home, we'd have dinner, hang out with the family, everyone goes to bed. And then I'm up for the next 5 hours learning everything I can about Amazon and how to kind of maximize that, and everything about e-commerce, because I knew nothing. So just reading blogs, listening to interviews, like just trying to basically digest the fire hose to get myself caught up. And I basically did that for 18 months or so. And, by that point I was double my teaching income. I was actually, it was costing me, going to work was costing me, because there's so much I could have been doing on the business, and I'm here at work teaching kids, and I'm like losing money by coming to work. And so I was like, okay, at the end of the school year, I'm done, I'm out. And to kind of celebrate, I was like, hey, let's just take a trip, because I've basically organized this business to where product comes from overseas. It goes to a third party logistics company, which sends it to Amazon, who ships it to the customer. And I don't even need to be anywhere. I just need a laptop with an internet connection. I can run this business. And so we took a trip to Sweden, and I picked Sweden because I've always wanted to go. My grandfather was Swedish, and he, grew up singing Swedish songs to us. And so I was like, I always wanted to go, just kind of visit. And also through all of this, I was into biking. That was my hobby. I'd actually bike 10 miles each way to school. We only had one car, and biking was kind of how I got around. I was kind of passionate about that. And part of it was saving money too. I was trying to pay down my student loans. And it's like, hey, if you get rid of the car, a lot less expenses. So anyways, well, Sweden, Denmark, Scandinavia, very, very bike friendly, probably the most bike friendly place in the world. So we went. It's like, that's where we picked. We were going to stay there for 2 months. And while over there, I just kind of just had this moment of just like awe. Like, I had this vision like 3 years ago of me free from having to do any day-to-day work, hanging out with my family anywhere in the world. And like, I'm like living it. I'm like doing it. It's like, this is unbelievable that this actually happened. And, at that point I had a daughter, she was 3 years old. We had a son on the way. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to keep biking when I've got 2 kids, and, we have errands and stuff to run. Like, how can I actually do this? And I saw a family cargo bike in Sweden for the first time while I was over there, which is basically a bike with like a big box on the front, got a couple of benches. You could put up to 4 kids in the front. Very kind of unique concept. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I need to get one of those when I come back home. And then we came back home, at the end of the summer, and there wasn't anywhere to buy one. Like, nobody in the States was making them, which was weird to me, because you look in Copenhagen, Denmark, like where we spent some time, and there's literally a bike like this on every street corner. They are all over the place. Like, you can't go down the street without seeing a bike like this. And yet there's nowhere to buy one. I've never seen anything like it. And I'm like a guy who's way into bikes. And I thought, something's not adding up here. And so I started just kind of digging around what companies are out there. Has anybody tried to do this? And there were some people who had tried and failed. It's like, okay, well, why did they fail? Maybe there's no market here. Maybe, they couldn't, or maybe they just didn't do a good job, and like just didn't know how to market or sell. So, at that time, it was like this kind of crossroads for me, because, I didn't have any affinity necessarily to the jewelry niche. It was a trend. I kind of jumped on it, but in the end, it's like I'm selling a commodity type product that's not really changing the world or making the world a better place. It's just kind of moving product from A to B, and I'm making some money, but it's not life-changing money. And it's, it's where like I'm not even motivated to work on this business because it's not fulfilling for me at like a core level. And so, yes, I've achieved the short-term goal of having some freedom in my life, but now that I have some skills, it's like what more is there to life? What do I want to do? Like what kind of impact do I want to have on the world? And so these were kind of questions I was turning around in my mind at the time, and things kind of just converged to where, hey, maybe this bike thing is an opportunity for me to kind of do something fulfilling. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea in my life, kind of leading up to that point. And I just like, hey, well, let's take a shot. Let's just see what happens. And so I sold that jewelry company, and for a few $100,000, which was as a former teacher, that was like more money I'd ever seen in my life. And at that moment, I achieved my goal of paying off my student loans. We had no debt, sitting on some savings, and so set some aside to live on, and let's put the rest into starting this bike company and see if we can get to go somewhere. So
That's what an amazing story. And okay, we're kindred spirits, because I mean, you threw so many things in there.
I know.
First of all, okay, you dropped the Tim Ferriss bomb, which I always say Tim Ferriss, even though he's younger than me, is definitely a virtual mentor, and very similar circumstances, man. I mean, what kind of really drove me into full bore entrepreneurship was my daughters. They were 2 and 3 at the time. And I'll never forget, I always tell this story. So starting out, I went straight into corporate America, flying all over the country. My last job was with the Home Depot, and so I'm living in Houston, and my office is in Vinings, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta where Home Depot's headquartered. And I'm traveling all the time. And my oldest daughter, Rylan, who was 3 at the time, she hated whenever I would leave to go to the airport. And I never knew, do I leave out, as late as possible Sunday night so that she at least I get to say goodbye, or really early on Monday where she doesn't have to see me leave. And there was never a good time to leave. And then finally, one time I'm headed to the airport. She doesn't get upset. She's coloring. She looks back and she says, "Okay, bye, Daddy." And basically like, "Okay, this is life. You're leaving." And I was like, all right, change to be made. And I started looking for businesses to buy. So that's how I came into entrepreneurship too. So it's amazing what children will do. But wow. Okay. But I will say this, the way you executed on the 4-hour work week, which is the book that kind of lays out what Tim did with his, I guess his, protein bar company, what was it? Quicken Brain, or Brain
Something
Quicken.
like that. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Yep.
Okay. So take us back. Let's dive into that a little bit about, and first of all, the Amazon business. And here's the thing, Aaron, that a lot of people listening, and I want you to please take the time to be an instructor on the Texas Titans podcast, because that's the value that I want to give to this audience. And man, you have executed in spades on what so many people out there listening. And by the way, they're not just guys as young as you, or kind of at the midpoint like me. Some of them are 55 years old that have a lot of great experience, but they're like, where do I even start? So kind of talk to us. And also, real quick, you had a spouse, you had a business partner at home that you had to kind of work through this with. So take us back to some of those big sticking points where the real milestone decisions had to be made how did you internalize it? How did you prepare to take the leap? How did you prepare to, starting the online business at Amazon, which I think is remarkable, that took some due diligence, but just kind of take us through some of get us in the weeds a little bit about some of those decisions you made early on.
Yeah. So, it was just a very gradual process for me. So I kind of had some guidelines, some rules that I'd set around myself, and kind of would make my wife more comfortable, which is that I'm not, so any money that I'm making from teaching, and I was the primary breadwinner, like anything I'm making from teaching, I'm not touching it. Like that is paying our bills. It's not putting anything at risk. The rent, we're paying it all. And I'm only going to set this money aside and basically double it down over and over and over again. And if I lose it all, I lose it all, but we still are able to pay our bills. So I mentioned in the beginning, I had kind of side hustle, flipping phones on Craigslist and laptops and stuff like that. And So I was making a solid like $10,000 a year. Just, I'd go on Craigslist once a day, any good deals in the area, okay, pick them up and flip them. And it wasn't really that much work, but like I kind of generated some money on the side. And so like, I'm going to use this to kind of play with, and something happens to it, then that's fine. And so, actually I did have a couple times where, I learned some hard lessons about, trusting people and fraudulent activity. And so, there was a time a guy, I paid him by wire, and he didn't actually exist, or he didn't have any product or phones to actually sell me. And my like $5,000 disappeared. It's like, it took me
Oh,
6 months of like driving around after work to like get that $5,000, and I lost it all,
Wow.
It's like,
Wow.
it's like totally got scammed. And, I had a similar thing happen like a few months later. It's like, after a few years of progress, you just feel like, oh God, like I can't, like maybe, my wife was like really hesitant, when I told her, hey, I'm looking at, importing stuff from overseas and like selling it on Amazon. She was really like, I just been burned twice. And she's like, Aaron, like, I think this is a bad idea, and so, but, following my rule of not touching our money, I went ahead and did it anyways without telling her, and took a few $100s, like, okay, I'm going to try this. And if it doesn't work, well, I'll just quit, it won't be anything. But if it does, I'll let her know after a few months of me having some success. And of course, once the success is there, nobody's going to, she was happy to hear it. So, no, it was funny. She was actually like, she actually said to me a few months after I started that jewelry business, she's like, hey, I was on Pinterest and I saw these, these amber necklaces, like these for like children's. Like, have you ever seen these? These are pretty cool. And it's like, oh yeah, actually I've been selling them for a few months. I got a bunch of them in the closet right now. That was pretty funny. But yeah, just, but as far as like just getting started, I try to de-risk myself as much as possible. Like I don't recommend people quit their job immediately and go before you've proven anything. Like there's got to be something to go on. And for me, it gave me confidence to kind of move forward, which is some initial traction. Like, okay, like when I sold 30 necklaces in a day, it's like, okay, there's something here. Like I got to put more attention onto this. If it had been crickets for weeks, yeah, maybe it's not something to pursue, or maybe you just try to figure out what's not working. But also just knowing that like I had a fallback plan.
Yep.
But even going along into it, I've been a year into it, and I'm like spending all my time in the evenings working on the business. You come to that crossroads of, okay, do I quit my day job and do this? And there's a lot of kind of fear around that decision. But what I kind of realized by that point is like, look, I've been digesting everything there is to know about e-commerce and selling online for the last 18 months. At this point, I probably know more than like 95% of people out there, just from like the constant study and reading everything that's out there. So, what I see as the worst case is I quit my job, Amazon shuts down tomorrow and I lose everything. I've got some skills that I can deploy or go get another job. It's like, I can probably get paid to double what I am teaching to go run somebody's, Amazon store for their business or something. It's
Yep.
like, so I think the fallback is having skills. If you have skills, they can pay the bills, so like, so that kind of gave me the confidence to go. And, from there, it's just, I don't know. I haven't looked back, and also just, I'm just like the eternal optimist, and it gets me into trouble sometimes, but I have a hard time seeing the downside. So when all I can see is the upside, it makes things easier too.
Well, but that's pretty much kind of the DNA of any entrepreneur, man. I mean, you don't go into entrepreneurship where you're basically saying, "Hey, this thing doesn't exist. There is no paycheck. There are no benefits. But I'm going to go create all of it." You have to have a sense of optimism to make that happen. And there's so much wisdom in what you said, Aaron. And one of the things that I talk a lot about on this podcast is, and again, I have to be careful because I don't ever want to completely dismiss business school. I went to B school at SMU, and I'm a proud SMU Mustang, but you are a living example of the alternative. And in fact, let's go back to Tim Ferriss. That is exactly like, I don't know if you ever even considered going to business school at any point in your career, but Tim Ferriss came to that point where he probably could have gone to Stanford or Kellogg. And you pick the business school. Tim Ferriss is a bright guy, had the resume to go, but instead he decided, well, instead of doing that, I'm going to take that capital and I'm going to invest it in testing a business and learning. And just exactly what you said, worst case scenario, you have skills and you have an education that you're just not going to get in B school, that is real life to draw from, and that there is value in the marketplace for. And by the way, I think it's more and more as time goes on. I think these days the skills that you develop are more and more. So I love that aspect of it. Now, tell me a little bit about whenever you were running the necklace business. How did you set yourself up, like with goal setting and priority? Because that it takes discipline. I always tell people that it takes, and you said, you'd have dinner and you go focus on the business, which again, Gary Vaynerchuk, that's one of the things he's always asking. So, you say you're passionate, you say you have a job and you can't do this. What are you doing from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m.? What are you doing? There's 24 hours and you were executing, you were actually using that time. So how did you keep yourself on track and disciplined to make sure that you were getting the greatest yield from that off hours, quote unquote, real job time?
Well, as far as staying motivated, what was key was actually having a group of people doing the same thing that I was hanging out with every night. So it's like, okay, 8 p.m. rolls around, open up Skype. There's like my group of like 10 guys. They're all in varying states of just getting started or have been doing it for a few years, selling on Amazon. And we're just going to chat. Hey, did you guys see this article today? Hey, did you hear this podcast? We're like basically digesting any new piece of information, or, oh, Amazon, they just changed their algorithm. Hey, we got to make sure we're doing this. It's like, so just having like a group of people doing the same thing was key, because actually for the first 6 months, I had no idea what I was doing. And although I had a lot of initial traction, it all kind of tapered off once like some competition and stuff started to show up, and I didn't really understand the search rank or advertising or anything. I didn't really know what I was doing. But when I found this group of guys, it was like rocket fuel on my efforts, because I realized very quickly I was doing everything wrong. And like, while some of these guys may not have been the smartest in the world, like they knew a lot more than I did. They were a lot further on the journey. So I got up to speed very, very quickly, at least up to their level. And so it was like every day, it's like I'm working on my business, but at the same time, I'm hearing what these guys are doing. It was like kind of this positive feedback loop. And even to this day, I've got groups of people that I, rely on a daily, weekly basis, just to kind of keep tabs on where they're at. So, yeah.
I love that, because let me tell you something. One of the greatest mistakes I ever made, Aaron, whenever I first got into entrepreneurship, I was in the real estate business, and my ego was probably the greatest. Ryan Holiday's written the book "Ego is the Enemy," and if
I'm actually reading it now, yeah.
Dude, it's phenomenal. And the thing is, I'll tell you, you are executing far better than I did. I should be on the cover of that book. As a matter of fact, I've thought about writing another book. It's funny. The older you get, the more your mind highlights in a positive way the mistakes you've made in real life, and because you become comfortable with them. And so I wrote this book, Push Play, Taking Your Life Off Pause, kind of escaping corporate America to go into entrepreneurship. And it's basically about the successes and the good side of that. But I also need to write a book that's like, how to destroy a company, a small business in 4 days, because I know how to do that as well. And the biggest component to that is ego. What I didn't do is I would not reach out and ask enough questions and ask for help and build that kind of tribe of mentors. I had good mentors, but not in the space that it was all my competition, right? So what was it that led you to these guys, and how did you find them? Because I guarantee you there are people listening to this podcast that are creators or want to be creators or want to do some e-commerce. They're, they just probably signed up for their first subscription to Shopify, and they're like, okay, what the heck is next? How did you find these folks?
Well, so I don't know, for a few years I would just like Google, like, I think I just found like this entrepreneurial forum or something, like it's online, like a forum. And I wasn't posting much because I didn't have much to post about, but I would just read. And even before, probably 3 to 4 years before starting the Amazon business, I've been reading about people doing exactly that. And, and back to your earlier point about, do you go to business school or not? It's like, I found the most value just from actually doing it, because I thought about doing such things for like 4 years. And it wasn't until I actually did it where I actually started learning, everything that I read about started to make sense. But it was just through a thread on there. Somebody was like, "Hey, I'm selling on Amazon, starting a group. Anybody want to join in?" And it was that simple. But I know there's things like Facebook groups or, any podcast, a lot of times they have like a community based around that, like a Facebook group or something. So just, Skype, Discord, there's lots of groups out there. If you just start looking, for whatever your thing is, there's a whole thing with Shopify sellers. There's a whole thing with pretty much any industry. It's just, you got to go out of your way to find it. And so even now, like in the bike industry, it's like, there's like, bike industry networking events that I actually signed up to go to some of these, and then COVID happened and everything got canceled. So I actually haven't been to any of those yet, but just connecting with people doing the same thing you're doing, you just got to search for it.
Well, one of the things too, so I just finished the book. You just reminded me of something, and I want to stay here for a little bit. I can't remember, I don't know where I put it. Oh, here we go. I don't know if you've read Everything is Figure Outable. Have you read that by chance?
No.
It's this book. Okay. For those who are watching this online and those who can't see us, Maria Forleo, I always think I'm pronouncing her last name wrong, but it's Everything is Figure Outable. Fantastic book. And so much of it has to do with what you just said. And I want to read to you my favorite quote from this book, and just tell me how you've lived this, and kind of, because it's going to speak to something you just said earlier about just doing it. That's where you learn. My favorite quote from her book, Everything is Figure Outable, is action is the antidote to fear. So talk to us a little bit about some of the fear you had, but then you executed and you found out what was on the other side of fear, which is usually experience and nothing to be scared of. So kind of talk a little bit about that, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% true. The things I dread doing, it's like as soon as I start doing them, they're it's like they were nothing, right? So like, I can be a procrastinator at times, and like that it totally plays into like action. If you're so busy, doing, you don't have time to be scared. You're just drowning in work and opportunity. But it actually reminds me of like the way that I kind of work with my employees is, everything's figure outable. Like, so like, I don't let them come to me and say, "Hey, here's this situation. Hey, here's this thing. What do I do?" Like looking for guidance from me. I always put it back on them. What do you think we should do? What do you want to do? And so before they come to me, they got to come and say, "Hey, here's this problem. Here's what I want to do about it. What do you think?" And like 95% of the time, I'll just say, "Yeah, do that." And then saves me the mental energy. And most of the time they can figure it out on their own anyways. Because, early on, I kind of became the bottleneck. I was the guy who solved all the problems. And then you get to a point where, when do I get to do my own work? It's like I'm doing everybody else's work, right? So I'm a firm believer that you can learn how to do anything. It's like, I got a leaky faucet in the bathroom last night. Turn on YouTube. Okay, within 10 minutes, I've got the parts ordered and I'm ready to fix it. 5 years ago, I had hired a plumber to do the exact same repair. It's like, it's not hard. You can learn how to do anything. Hell, I didn't even mention before, like kind of simultaneously at the time I was starting this Amazon business, I also was dabbling in an appliance repair and sales business. Like I completely learned from YouTube, right? I actually would go on Craigslist. I'd buy broken washers and dryers. I'd fix them up. I'd sell them. I'd deliver them. I was pulling a trailer behind my Honda Civic and like driving all over town with these things. And I thought maybe this was going to be the business that, so I actually spent a whole summer between semesters, like doing washers and dryers every single day. I had like 20 appliances out of my driveway. I'm surprised the city didn't shut me down. And, but I knew nothing going into it. It's like, the dryer not heating, put it in Google, go through the symptoms, figure it out. And pretty soon you start to see patterns like, okay, if it's this, most likely it's going to be this $3 part. And then you've got a working dryer. So like you can literally learn anything, and very, very quickly with the internet and YouTube. And like, there's just the cycle of how fast things are changing is just, dramatic, and everything you can learn online. And I think there is value to business school, especially when your business gets to a certain level like that I'm at now, where it's like, man, I wish I had a background in, corporate finance or whatever, because I'm having to learn it all on the fly. And there's a lot of people depending on me right now for those sorts of things. And so there's value there, but, there's also value in just getting started and making a mess and just, learning by doing,
Absolutely. And one of the things too, I got to recommend another book for you. As you can tell, I'm a big reader, and Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck.
Yeah,
So for the
that was
list,
that was mandatory reading when I was a teacher, actually, and I actually brought that book up in one of our morning meetings this week.
well, here's why I bring it up now, because to the listener who happens to subscribe to my newsletter, the Vitruvian Letter, or looks at my book reviews, if you'll remember, I did Mindset, and Aaron, you are the epitome of someone with that growth mindset that is, you can figure things out, and I'm a recovering fixed mindset guy, either you're smart or you're not, either you're fast or you're slow, whatever the case may be. I was very fixed, and, everything had to do with where you were born, who your parents were, what the DNA was, and what you have just described, man. I mean, Dr. Carol Dweck would be sitting there just ringing the mindset bell, going, "All right, here's our prototype. Here is the growth mindset prototype in Aaron Powell." So I think that's remarkable. And to the listener out there, if you are afraid to jump into a business or whatever, I mean, look, Aaron, tell the listener. I mean, what's the worst that could happen, right? I mean, talk a little bit about that.
I guess the worst that could happen is you're back where you started.
Right. With more experience, right?
Yeah, with more experience, right? Exactly. So, but I mean, you hedge your bets. Like you don't, you don't need a ton of money to start a business, but if you find that, hey, I got to put down $10,000 to get this started, and it's my life savings, like just, I don't know, just do your due diligence and make sure that it's going to be worth taking a shot at. Like, get some market validation with as little money as possible. Like, like the MVP concept, minimal viable product. Like, put something out there with as little investment as possible and see how do people respond to it. What do they think? And based on those, you can go deeper into it. But you don't need a ton of money to kind of take those initial basic steps forwards.
Well, and one of the things too that you did really well that I think is a good lesson and something to convey to the listener is, I think it's Ramit Sethi who wrote the book "I Will Teach You to Be Rich." I think that's it. And his whole concept is exactly what you said. It's like, now, granted, living a frugal life is fantastic. It's good discipline. I'm all about it. Living debt free. But also there comes a point where, like, what you've done is, okay, instead of just cutting our expenses lower and lower and lower, there is an alternative, which is to go find other ways to make more money, to be able to allow yourself to do the things that you want to do, instead of just never having a cup of coffee outside the house, never doing, whatever, to get those student loans paid off. Instead, go find an entrepreneurial venture or a hustle that can give you more resources, more capital to do those things you want to do. And that's the thing. I think people fall into this trap of, again, kind of a fixed mindset. And man, if ever there was a shining example, you had a fixed income as a teacher, as an educator, not a lot of bonuses being handed out to our educators, right?
No.
So I mean, so you were a guy that said, okay, this is my baseline. So if I'm going to get a bonus, if I'm going to have extra capital, it's going to have to come from what's between my two ears and figuring out a way. And so I think that's a very great concept for the listener to get their mind around, that there is this alternative to have more money. It's not just getting a promotion, getting your annual living increase, but it's finding a way to add to your income. So, man, I really admire that, man.
And I even found that setting boundaries and like fixed rules was kind of freeing to my creativity, because it's like, okay, the reality is I have this job and I got to keep this job. So how do I start and run a business that I can do simultaneously to this? Like, there's some constraints on the problem here. It's like, okay, well, from 8 to 4 every day, I'm not available. And so with what kind of business can I start that's going to make me money 24/7, whether I'm actively doing something or not? It's like, I can't go sell appliances while I'm also at school. And so I tried that, during a summer when I was off, but like, if you're going to get something going, like, what can I get going in the evenings that's going to continue to generate an income? And there was a part of that Amazon business where I actually started selling into wholesale. So I actually had 120 retail stores selling my product as well. And I grew that whole side of the business while also still teaching. But the problem was, like, okay, you're teaching, you can't cold call people right now. You can't go visit people. You can't go demo your product because you're tied up all week long. So what do you do? So I basically just, scraped a bunch of leads from Google Maps. Okay, got everybody's email for all these different stores, and just, I put it into an automated email program that was automatically following up. So it was like all by email, kind of cold emailing. And it wasn't the most efficient way. It's, like the return was like, the conversion rate was really, really low on that. But the return on my time was excellent because I was spending zero time doing anything because I was teaching all day. And meanwhile, the emails are going out, getting people's interest, right? And then it's like, hey, well, actually, there's these things called independent sales reps. And so I got, independent sales reps divided up, got one in each territory of the country. And now they're selling on my behalf. I'm paying them a commission, but they're generating more wholesale revenue for me. And I'm still teaching at school and I don't have to do anything. So,
Right.
and then even like with the trip and traveling, it's like, okay, 6 months before we left, it's like, okay, this summer we are going to Europe for 2 months. Currently, I'm packing up necklaces in my garage with a bunch of college kids once a month, sending them to Amazon. So I'm setting this hard parameter. We're going out of the country for 2 months. I need to figure out how to design a logistics solution that will allow this to happen. And so that's when, like, okay, let me get a third-party logistics company and we'll figure out how to get them to do it. And let's just get the product out of my city altogether, and then nothing's dependent upon me. And yeah, so it's like you just kind of frame these constraints and you just think, okay, and this is the growth mindset: is you start off assuming it's possible. How would you do it?
Yeah.
Just assume from the very beginning, this thing I want to do is possible. Now think logically, step by step, break it down. What's the first step to making that happen?
I love it, man. That's one of the first things I always ask whenever I'm doing a consulting gig for a team, or like if I'm doing that's a exercise I love to do, is I ask a crowd, okay, you have to go to the moon tomorrow to save your mom. How do you get there? And it's like, well, most people are like, well, I don't know. How am I going to get to the moon? You got to figure something out. What's the first step? And it's just getting that momentum going. I love what you said there. Just assume from the get-go it is possible, and then kind of reverse engineer it or back up. I think that is fantastic. And I also love the fact that talking to you, it's like you're like the good guy Walter White. There's Breaking Bad, so you could have been a chemistry teacher becoming a meth kingpin, but instead you're a band teacher that actually did it legally. And it's so kids that are listening out there is a legal and very, very good way to make this happen, man. That's awesome.
I felt like a Walter White sometimes when I'm meeting people at gas stations and they're giving me a phone out of their window and I'm giving them like $200 in cash. It's like I felt like that sometimes. Or even just, it's like I'd get a box, I wire $10,000 to Lithuania and I get a box like this big full of necklaces. It's like, oh geez, like I don't know.
What are people thinking?
My friend and my phone's like ringing all the time. It's like, okay, like people think something about me here. I don't know.
That's awesome. I love it. All right. Well, so now let's move into what you've dug into now, what took you to Shark Tank. You've gone to Sweden. You realize, there's not a cargo bike like you got used to in Sweden in the States. Take it from there, man. How does that journey begin? Well, I guess let's pick back up with that journey and take it all the way to, I guess, NBC.
I kind of based on my past experience, what's worked to say incremental beginning, let's build off of it. Somebody looks at starting a bike company, they might initially think, oh, like I either need to be an engineer or need to go hire an engineer. We need to put 2 years in R&D, a couple $100,000. Like this is like maybe the way that you might approach the problem. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, like there's nothing here. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. So let me just find a manufacturer that's already making bikes for the European market. And let's just like take that existing design, get them to, ship me a prototype, just like, hey, give me exactly what you're making for Europe. Give me a prototype. And let me just ride it around, kind of get my bearings. Is it good quality? What do people think about it? Take some pictures, put them on Instagram, and all in. I got started with like $1,500 just like to kind of get a bike over here. So
yeah.
And just I started riding around Denton, and it's like from the very first ride, I couldn't get off my street without somebody stopping me to say, hey, what is that thing? Where did you get that? That's pretty cool. I go downtown Denton, I'm like swarmed by people. Like people are like, hey, can I take a picture of that, put it on Instagram? Like, yeah, of course you can. It's like
Right.
everyone thought it was just like really cool and like interesting and gathering all this attention. It's like, okay, this is pretty interesting. There might be something here. And then the same thing on Instagram. Like, you know, I I'd never had a smartphone before. I'd never used Instagram. So like I literally bought a phone so I could do Instagram for the business. And like, it's like the worst. It's like an iPhone 4, really low quality pictures, like just me around town with my daughter, it's like, and I'm putting these pictures up, but they're getting the same response online. Hey, where is that? Are those for sale? Can I get one? Like, it's like, okay. So I just did that for a few months and clearly there's a lot of interest here. And so incremental progress. What's the next step? Let's see if people will pay for these, right? I don't have any product. Let's see if they'll pay me before I even have any product.
Yeah.
So I put up a website, on Shopify and put up the bike, and it's like it was almost embarrassing how bad it was, but it doesn't matter because I put it up and say, okay, we're going to take pre-orders. I launched it on Instagram, kind of let everyone know that was following me. Hey, we're going to take pre-orders and you'll get your bike in 3 to 4 months. But you got to pay in full today. And we got a lot of interest actually. So we actually sold half the container just that first couple of weeks. I put them on
Really?
a big discount to kind of incentivize it, right? 30% off some huge
Yeah.
discount or something, but people did it, an untrusted company that nobody knew anything about. And then some bloggers pick it up and put it out there, and that generates more interest. And I just was able to take that money then and pay the factory with it. So okay, like, hey, the bike's good quality. I've been riding it for a few months. Let's make all these changes to it, change the components, whatever, and let's do a 20-foot container of bikes like this. And I was out zero money from the very beginning, just using customer money to pay for that first run. And then by the time I finally got the container, it was 100% sold out. So like, that's kind of the initial way. So like, and then kind of from that point until now, we have been behind demand and not able to meet it. Like,
Wow.
it's continually like things are just selling out very, very quickly. And, it's like, so that was kind of the genesis. And, it, again, just incremental progress and just kind of taking things step by step and testing the waters. And okay, it's like, okay, they're responding well. Let's take it the next step. Response is good. All right, take the next step, go further. And, and I didn't want to go too deep on inventory because it's a factory, it's like, what if the quality isn't good when they make, 30 bikes versus one bike? Yeah, the one bike is great, but what if they make 30 and they're cutting corners and quality isn't there? So let's not go too deep into this. Let's just evaluate kind of every step of the process along the way. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. So now it comes to the point where you have to scale. And so what did that, and I guess the demand is what kind of made you realize, all right, this is no longer, this business has legs. And so we've got to scale it. And so what did that look like? And what did the journey to Shark Tank look like? How did you decide, okay, I need some outside capital. I need some, and let me ask you this. Was the trip to Shark Tank, was it for, I guess, awareness? Because that's definitely an avenue. I mean, because you can go to private equity, especially here in the Metroplex. I mean, outside of New York these days, all my buddies that are in PE, private equity, and VC, outside of Silicon Valley, New York, Dallas is a hotbed. So you're right there. You're right up the street. So what was the strategy going to Shark Tank and looking for outside capital? How did you make the decision of where, borrow money, take on capital from investors? Kind of walk us through that decision, those check boxes, if you will, that you had to check off to make it to where okay, this is the route I'm taking to scale this business.
Yeah, sure. So it all kind of culminates there, but kind of right where I left off is where everything went wrong. So
All right.
the only thing that hasn't gone wrong in this business is demand and sales. I quickly realized manufacturing bikes is a lot harder than I thought it was. And actually, the quality was really, really bad on that first container, like bad enough to where I couldn't, like, we actually found a defect in the frame and actually had to get all the frames remade, and like customers weren't getting their bikes, and like we had to like redo it all. And whatever money I had set aside, it was quickly burned through, that I collected. And all my personal money quickly got burned up over the next year as I went to figure out, okay, I don't know anything about manufacturing bikes. It's a lot more difficult than I thought it was. this is my optimism biting me in the butt here. So I didn't take the proper steps to really vet a manufacturer, get a consultant, somebody who really knows. And so that was kind of the next journey over the following year was, you know, we got to figure out a new manufacturer. And so, so like the next year was like just marked by, we were like out of stock for long periods of time, months and months at a time, as we kind of transitioned over. And so I was burning through cash in the meantime. And so if everything had gone well on the manufacturing side, I probably never would have needed outside money and never would have sought it. I had enough to kind of spin things up from there and put it all back into the business. But I burned everything. I actually ended up, as many personal credit cards as I could get, I had maxed them out, and just basically living on nothing, trying to keep the business alive, because I had this dream. It's like, I know it's going to work because there's so much demand and interest, and like this side of the market's there. All I got to do is just figure out how to get a good quality bike into their hands. I just got to figure out the logistics and the operations behind it. And so like that kept me going. But kind of like, and it was like the whole, like I said, business schools, like I didn't have any formal business training. And, with my first business, the lead times were so short, and with the necklaces, like I could buy product, I could have it in my hands in 10 days. Like I didn't have to plan or forecast. I would just react in the moment.
Yep.
And when you're making bikes and the lead times are 4 to 6 months on different things, it's like you can't run the business the same way. And I learned that the hard way. And so, I started taking out loans to kind of make ends meet. It's like, okay, I got to take out loans for the inventory. And then you get to a point where you can't borrow any more money. Nobody's giving you any more money. And then I had to take a hard look at the business and say, sales are great. Like we just sold $1 million worth of bikes. Why don't I have money to pay inventory? Like why are things not adding up? And you take a hard, I basically had to go through a crash course. There's a book by Greg Crabtree called Simple Numbers, and it changed everything for me. It took complicated corporate finance and dumbed it down for a dummy like me who knew nothing about P&Ls and balance sheets. It's like, okay, let me go through this little exercise. And it was like clear as day, black and white. You're not charging enough money for your bikes. There's not enough gross profit to pay your expenses. It's like, oh, okay. So raise my price $800 overnight. We're profitable, and the sales didn't slow down. So it was like, okay. But at that point, we were still very weak financially because I had so much cash going out to loans. Like the amount I was paying in loans per month was more than the income I was making. And so it was like I was borrowing money to pay for money I had already borrowed. I was like in this negative cycle of debt that was like, how do I get out of this? And, I kind of got by. It's like, okay, we just got to make it to this next spring. It's the middle of winter. We just got to make it to spring when sales take off again. I've got a plan. I've got cash flow. I've got everything planned out. We've got a plan to work it down. We just got to make it to spring to make ends meet. So I kind of, as a bridge, started taking money from family and friends. And I knew nothing about raising money, but just, learn step by step, whatever you got to know. I read every book there was on angel investing and raising money, and learned everything, and talked to people who had done it, and just started taking, my mom, my sister, some friends, they put in, and then, okay, we're going to make it to spring. We're going to be okay. And then it's like, then COVID-19 happens, and it's like, suddenly nobody's buying any bikes. It's like spring sales are supposed to be here, and the phone stops ringing, the emails stop. Nobody's buying anything because people are unsure of what's going to happen. Are we going to lose our jobs? Like, is everything going to be shut down? And I'm thinking, is the governor going to shut our business down? Are we going to be even allowed to operate? I've got employees, how am I going to pay them? Like, we've got 1 week of expenses in the bank. It's like, it was like kind of like last March was like the most stressful period of my life, probably. And I even had to talk with the guys like, hey, we I might not be able to pay you anymore going forward. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen. And, and so like at this point, I'm like, I'm just trying to survive. Right. And, but what actually ended up happening was COVID spiked the biggest bike boom of all time. Everyone wants to get outside and get on a bicycle. And so by mid-April, we have more business than we can handle. And it's like, oh man, why didn't we order more bikes in the middle of March? Because we're going to be out of stock really, really soon. So, but in the meantime, I'm still kind of raising some money to keep things. I want more of a cushion. Like, sales are good, but it's still very, very tenuous. So I started raising some money there, and then it became very apparent that the actually increased demand from COVID was going to completely wreck the supply chain. That's the flip side of a strong market, is all of a sudden everyone worldwide is riding bikes.
Yep.
Now every bike company in the world is hitting up their bike manufacturers. Hey, we need more bikes than ever.
Yep.
And then things got really backlogged really quickly. It's like, we're not good. Like, I have enough to sustain what we're currently doing, but but the lead times increased from 3 months to 10 months, 12 months beyond. Like, I'm having to pay for bikes I'm not going to get for more than a year. Like, we don't have the cash flow for this. And so, that's when I kind of started looking at more investors, and, it's like, hey, it's a strong industry. I've just got this, short-term problem to overcome when it comes to cash. And so when it comes to Shark Tank and the show, that I was looking at the show for a couple of reasons. One was for money, and even though there were cheaper ways to get money, and other investors I talked to, the exposure was a big part of it.
Absolutely.
I knew from the very beginning the biggest challenge with this is that nobody knew this product category existed. I was a biker. I was a target market. I had kids. No idea it existed until I left the country and saw it somewhere else. And so I had this vision from the very beginning of me on some national platform, be it the Good Morning America or Ellen show or something, telling the world about it, like, hey, these amazing bikes. And so, like, hey, Shark Tank could be that as well, getting in front of millions of people. And so the beginning of last year is when I put in that application online, just like, hey, one of my employees is the world's biggest Shark Tank fan, and she's like, hey, you gotta be on Shark Tank, you gotta put it in there. So, you answer the 6 questions online, and you don't think anything's going to happen, but what they're looking for is somebody with a good story, kind of the American dream, right? And somebody with an interesting product that is different than what they've had on the show before. And I kind of checked both of those boxes. And so they called me, and we kind of went through the process. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, it just kind of incremental from step by step. They asked me to make an audition tape, and I was like, okay, well, this is my chance. If they like the tape, they're going to move me forward. If not, then we're done. So we better go all out for this thing. And I had one of my high school buddies who had a video company. It's like, hey, we need to make a professional videotape in a week. And so, like, you got to, do your pitch and your financials and all this stuff for the audition. And I actually did all of it while riding my kids on my bunch bike around Denton. And he had this camera out the back of his minivan. It's like this kind of cool thing. It's like I'm doing this business pitch while riding around, and like, it was really kind of unique and standout, and it got their attention, and they moved me forward. And yeah, so that, and then we went out and filmed.
And what was that experience like?
It was very surreal. And the lead up to it was so intense, because, once they kind of gave you that spot on the show, like, hey, we're going to film you, it's like reality hits in. Like, this is going to be the biggest moment of my life here.
Yeah.
Like, millions of people are going to see this. Every one of my friends is going to watch this. You want it to be good, right? You want it to be a positive look on you and the company, because it's going to follow you around the rest of your life one way or the other. So I just started like an intense preparation process where, every night watching episode after episode, taking like just, copious notes of, okay, anytime they ask a question, I write that question down on this Word doc, and I'm getting like hundreds of questions on this Word doc. And so during the day, I'm like spending my time digging into financials and finding answers to these questions. And at night, I'm finding new questions. And then I got to memorize it all, because Shark Tank, it's one take. They don't do any redos. You don't have any notes on you. You don't, it's like you have to know it all at the top of your head. So it's like this intense kind of memorization process and flashcards, and for a guy who's not a financial guy, and I struggle to keep numbers in my head, and I hate spreadsheets. Like, it was a huge challenge for me, but in the end, like, that was kind of the preparation process. And then this year was kind of special because with COVID, like, LA was shut down. They weren't allowed to film in LA. So they had to move it out to Vegas. They actually rented out a hotel in Vegas and made like a bubble that, before you could enter the bubble, you had to quarantine for 2 weeks.
Oh,
so
wow.
I went out to Vegas, 2 weeks early, and basically was locked in a hotel room and couldn't leave. They brought me food 3 times a day. It was like being in prison. And it's like, so, you're already stressed that this thing is about to happen, but you have nothing else to distract you. You can't go for a run. You're just in this room by yourself, just letting the thoughts kind of, do what they're doing. And about a week and a half into it, I convinced myself that this was a bad idea, and I just needed to go home, and like, I'm not ready. And like, it's like the stress just starts to eat you alive. And then, but then it's like the day of, it's like, well, you just got to do it, get pumped, put on the music. It's like, if I know it, it's like, and if you know it, you do it, and if you don't, you don't. But now's the time to do it. And so, as a musician, this kind of came out to help me because I've been on stage hundreds of times playing with bands, orchestras, solo recitals, whatever, so that I'm pretty comfortable on stage and in front of a camera. So, in the moment, all that kind of just fell away, and it's just like, okay, I'm here, let's do it, let's have some fun. And it was, yeah, like I said, surreal, because you've seen the show and it's like these larger than life personalities, but when you're there in person, like there's no dramatic music. It's like you're just having a conversation like we're
Yeah.
having now. You're just talking to some business people and having a conversation about business.
Yeah.
And and in the moment, it's like way less dramatic than it ends up being on TV. It's just like we're just having fun talking about bunch bikes. And
Right.
I kind of looked at it that way too. Just if I'm positive and I'm feeling good, and I'm, they're going to reflect that back onto me, versus, if you're arrogant and, you're not taking their feedback seriously, they're going to pile in and just rip you apart like they do. So,
Yeah.
like they do in the Shark Tank.
Man, wow, what an incredible experience, man. And it just keeps playing into your whole mindset of just taking action, taking action. And I just love that. And another thing too, that a lot of people don't realize, they watch the show, but they don't realize that most people, unless you're just, a serial entrepreneur, and you're used to doing startups and pitching deals constantly. And there are guys that's what they do. They pitch, deal after deal after deal. But usually the deck is stacked not in the guy pitching's favor, right? Those guys are used to hearing pitches all the time. I mean, I can't imagine how many pitches that now, especially whenever you get to the level of those folks where they've made their money, so now they're just looking for deals. So people are constantly coming and pitching them, and usually you've got about 5 minutes, and it's like in or out. And so it is a pressure cooker, and all my buddies in private equity and everybody that and having been on both sides of that table, it's a nerve-wracking experience, and you execute. And so then take us now. Where are we? I mean, you go, because I know the story. I talk about how the story with Shark Tank, that story sort of ends and then, begins or keeps going, and kind of like take us to present day where, and we haven't even mentioned the name of the bike. I want to know where you got the name for the bike. I mean, was it just as a scripter with Bunch Bike, or, kind of where did that come from?
Bunch bikes. Yeah. So, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about needing to get attention on the business. Yep. Like, okay, these bikes are big. They're like rolling billboards. So the name needs to be big right there on the side, so anybody on the street can see this thing and remember it when they go home. So it's got to be short, one syllable, easy to remember. People like alliteration. Bunch bikes. It's like, so just so, and it's got a fun connotation, but also it's kind of self-descriptive. You can put a bunch of stuff. There's like the Brady Bunch. It's like your family, yep. Right? So kind of all these ideas kind of played into where the name came from. Just something, and if somebody wants to type in the website Bunch Bikes, it's like, there it is. It's not some complicated kind of thing that you have to try to remember. What was that thing that I saw? It's like,
right.
Because people don't even know what to call it. Like the kind of the industry term is cargo bike, but if you saw it and you knew nothing about cargo bikes, like, what do you call this? Bike with a basket on the front of it? Like, you don't know what to call it. But if you see the word bunch on the side, you'll put bunch, and then maybe you'll type some sort of keyword that has bike in it, and hopefully you'll find us after doing that. So that was kind of where the name came from. But yeah, being on the show, like, it all goes so fast. And I felt like I was just getting warmed up and just like, okay, now like let's get into the business and like start talking about some things. I've got like the things I want to talk about and make sure that I get a chance to say. And right when I feel that way, is like when they start going out, it's like, whoa, you're going out. Like, we just started, like I didn't say anything about anything and you're already going out, Mark. It's like, this is, so then you get into like, then the pressure cooker really started of like, I gotta try to, like, I'm like on life support here. I gotta like throw some things out there, and then it gets down to one shark. It's like, oh man, like I'm back into a corner. And I'd kind of targeted Barbara from the very beginning, and she's the one I wanted to work with. She's the one who was kind of left standing. And so down back to the preparation, it's like, well, I'd studied all of these people. I knew their personalities. I read every one of their books. I listened to every interview. It's like, I knew what they wanted to hear. And so it's like, okay, if it's me and Barbara, she wants to hear a guy who can overcome obstacles and isn't going to quit, And so I shared a story on the show about a time that first factory screwed me with shipment of bikes that was completely rusted out and like had water damage. And so it's like, look, I could have quit at that point, but instead I took out a loan and like kept going, and it was just one step along the way. And so ultimately she came into the deal. And then this was actually a first in Shark Tank history, but Robert, who wasn't on my panel, Robert Herjavic, he actually came into the deal 50-50 with Barbara, which has never been done before. But the backstory on him is he actually had already heard about our bikes, actually had become a customer along the way. And so he was already riding our bikes around, which is probably why they didn't put him on my panel, because maybe a conflict of interest or something like that. But he, unbeknownst to me, approached Barbara and said, hey, I want to come in on this deal too. And so they kind of said, hey, Robert wants to come in. Are you cool with like having two sharks on here? It's like, absolutely, So it's like, so now I've got two kind of people in my corner that I can rely on. And I, got some capital too, of course, which is helpful for the supply chain challenges that we're having. And so, and so then like the next 6 months, it's like, okay, we don't know if they're going to even use the footage. Sometimes people film and they don't even use the footage at all. They gets on the cutting room floor. So, but we have to prepare as if it is, because it's going to blow things up in a big way. So over last winter, we doubled our warehouse space, doubled the team, and like got a bunch of inventory on the way. And it's like, I'm all kind of hoping that it's going to work out. And it's like, and I only found out 2 or 3 weeks before it even aired that, hey, it's going to air on this day. So it's like we had like very little heads up that it was actually even going to happen. And I was, a little less than a month ago, just a few weeks ago, that it aired. And so we're just now coming on the other side of like, the kind of explosion of interest, and now it's kind of back to normal. And I felt like there was this void in my life. Like, this has been the goal for like a year, and now it's happened. And what's next? Like, what are we working for now? I felt kind of aimless for a couple of weeks. Like,
yeah,
I don't know what's priority anymore, because priority was getting ready for Shark Tank, and then we did it. And now what's next? What's the next big thing? And so I actually just took a day, just like, I'm just going to stay away from the warehouse. I'm going to go somewhere else, just sit down with my notepad on a couch somewhere and just write down all my thoughts. Where do I want this to go long term? What do I want to do in the next 3 years? Like, start to chart the path forward. And then on Monday this week, I got all the leadership and just said, hey, like, let's go off site. Let's talk about what's the next year look like. Here's my vision. Here's where I want to go. Like, what's priority next week? What's priority this quarter? And then even today, weekly meetings, like, okay, are we on track for what we said we were going to do this quarter? So now we've kind of got this rhythm and this kind of new course charted in front of us for what's next. And so that was pretty exciting. We've got kind of the wind in our sails, if it were, from this point going forwards.
I love it, man. And let's talk a little bit about, I'm sure that something that came out of that, probably that notepad session, was, your kind of your core mission, what you want to do with the company, because I think that's impressive. And having, the last real estate firm that I founded with Chris Phillips, who we called it, we says business with a purpose. We had an idea to create a company that did more than just, make money. It wasn't just about profit. It was about being a good community partner. And so, and I know that's kind of where your heart is with Bunch Bikes. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So kind of the inner kind of conflict I had was that this was growing beyond kind of my original, purpose or idea. I started off like, hey, I just want to scratch my own itch. Like, there's this bike that I want in the world that isn't there, and I want to get more families on bikes. And then as we start doing it, we start to uncover all these additional opportunities and all these additional kinds of customers, like, some like business to business opportunities. And hey, maybe there's some things we can do with like urban logistics and deliveries and things like this, but it doesn't fit into like whatever I thought my mission was, right? So it's like I kind of had to sort out, like, what is there a mission here that's product agnostic, that is customer agnostic, that is the overall thing that I'm trying to do, whatever business, like, maybe one day we're selling more than bikes, it's not just about bikes, maybe, so yeah. What is the overarching thing? It's like, I just sat like what keeps me going? What do I want to do? And it's just, I just kind of put it very simply. It's just to impact and enrich lives. Like that's what I want to do. Like so many of our customers, they write back like, this is the best thing I've ever purchased. It's changed our life completely. And it's like, it's bringing this quality to people's lives where they're more connected with their family or their kids and or their city, and they're leaving the car at home and like enjoying the journey along the way to wherever they're going in their neighborhood or their community. And like, this is what I want to do, whether it's a family, whether it's somebody who owns a dog, whether it's somebody with a special needs child at home, or if it's a guy, we've got a guy in Dallas who's actually bought 7 or 8 of our bikes, and he keeps coming back every couple months to buy another bike for his growing ice cream business. And so this is a guy, he was at like a crossroads in his life. He had like, he had $2,000 and that's all he had. And he bought a bunch bike with it. And then 3 months later, he has a box of cash from selling ice cream, ready to buy a second bunch bike. And like, so it's like, this guy is he's not buying a bike for his kids, but this is still like, we're changing his life, in a big way. So like, and I think I'm okay with this, so I had to kind of expand the vision to where it just, kind of left us open to maybe more opportunities. And it's just, so yeah, we're going to impact and enrich lives through selling quality cargo bikes, just focusing on quality. And so that's kind of the path forward. And so kind of with that, you leave a lot of paths open going forwards. And, I looked at where do we want to be in 10 years, and trying to get a picture of that when we haven't been there is difficult, but it at least gets everyone going in the same direction. The guys on the floor building and assembling and shipping the same bikes day in, day out, they want to know they're a part of something bigger. It's like, and so just being able to share this with the team, like, hey, like, here's where we're going. And every day, like, we have a morning meeting, it's like 15 minutes. And I make sure as part of that meeting every day, I share a good review somebody left us, or a nice email somebody sent us, or some pictures that they sent in. Like, hey, like, the work you're doing and focus on quality is actually impacting people's lives. And I like to share the stories with them so that they find meaning in their work. Because I find meaning, but, early on, like, coming from a guy who had a business with no employees, I kind of ran this business the same way. And I kind of struggled with leadership. I was always kind of in my own zone, in my own office, and kind of ignored everybody else. And I wasn't sharing the vision and ideas and things that were happening with everybody. And so it's like, it was just kind of poor morale and like lack of motivation. And so now having these kind of visions in place, and, of course, Shark Tank was very exciting for everyone to kind of like, get a lot of recognition for that. And everyone thinks it's cool and wants to talk to them about it now. So that's kind of exciting as well, but that's short term. What's the long term? Like, why are they going to stick around for 5 years and go on this crazy journey with me? It's because we're impacting and enriching lives. We're like making the world a better place.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Aaron, this has been one of the greatest conversations I've had in a long time, because there's a lot of reasons why. One, yes, it's entrepreneurship, but you mentioned the American dream, and I've described, I did a forward for a book not too long ago that was actually written by Phil Burks, I've done 2 episodes with Phil on the Texas Titans podcast. He's one of my mentors. He's an incredibly successful entrepreneur. And one of the things I wrote in the forward was, or the blurb was, not only has he lived the American dream, but he's also tasted the American nightmare that is entrepreneurship at times. And man, I think what you just described that's what you've seen both sides of. It's not all just, oh, wow, good idea, money starts flowing in, but having to max out those credit cards, having to make those tough decisions, but having belief in yourself, belief in the idea, having, I'm sure, a wife that's behind you, and a daughter that is a huge why. I guess it's Nietzsche, and then also Viktor Frankl, who always said, he who has a big enough why can overcome almost any how, and you've done that. There's just so much wisdom, my man, in what you just laid out over the last hour that, I got to say, brother, I am so glad we had this conversation. Now, before I let you go, let's just do something completely, because we do have, I could tell, man, like I said, we're kindred spirits. I want to know a couple of things. One, I want to know who your favorite composer is, because I'm also I'm a Mozart, unless I like Baroque pieces. So I love, Vivaldi. So I want to know who your favorite composer is. Oh, come on. You don't like any Vivaldi?
I hate all that stuff.
No. Who do you like? Bring it.
I'm total romantic era composer.
So like, Beethoven?
Late Beethoven's okay. Early stuff is too classical, but
yeah.
But no, like no Shostakovich,
Okay. Yes, I'm with you.
Tchaikovsky,
Love
All the
Tchaikovsky.
Russian, all the
So you like
Russian guys,
drama.
really.
You like to
Dude,
feel it.
I'm an
Yeah.
emotional drama
Got it.
guy. I want the music to make me cry. If I
Got it.
listen, I
I
listen to
respect that.
in the car. I listen to WRR classical station in Dallas, and what I actually don't like is they play too much Mozart and too much Vivaldi. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's just like this is so boring. I can't get into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, I get and look, hey, full confession. It's because whenever I came up, I was not a student of music. So I read Ron Chernow's book on Mozart, his just, about 10-pound biography on Mozart. So I started listening to, and I bought every symphony. Then I started buying, everything that I could. I had the whole library. So that's where I started. And yes, you start with the most obvious pieces, So, but I do like the romantic stuff too.
There's a handful of Mozart that I'll listen to. I like his clarinet concerto. I
Oh
like
yeah.
Symphony Number 40 because it's a little darker, but all of
Yes.
the really light stuff is like, doesn't do anything for me. I want to I want to feel angst when I'm like
I hear you.
listening to classical music. I want to hear the brass sections. I was a French horn player myself, so like I gotta hear the French horns. So
I got it. All right. Well, so okay. Well, is it in the? I think, and again, going back to the most obvious, but I think it's in Beethoven's Fifth, right? In the third movement where the French horns really kind of shine. It's one, I think it's in the fifth. Oh God, I'm not going to try to do it on air of the actual piece, but there's one where the French horns shine. But all right. So with that, tell me now that we've got to where we can fight over classical music, what are you reading? How are you feeding your mind? And what are your practices now that you're a CEO, a founder, a CEO? What are you doing to stay sharp, mentally?
Yeah. So, one is I'm always tempted to sleep less and like work more. And I've learned the hard way many times. And somehow I'm still learning this lesson over and over again, is that there's no substitute for good sleep, and that work can always wait till tomorrow. And that, if I try to now these days, if I try to stay up late, it's like my brain just goes to mush. I become less and less effective over time. So I've become more of an early morning guy. So it's like I actually protect that time at night now from 8 to 10. And I'm just in bed, maybe talking with my wife. Maybe we'll watch a show together, but more often than not, I'm reading a book because it kind of relaxes me. And I don't know, maybe my dreams and thoughts can reflect on it so that's kind of my routine, is I'm just reading a book every night before I go to bed. And, I wake up, I go to sleep somewhere around 10 and then wake up at, 5 generally, and kind of just start the day and work out or exercise. And then, maybe do some work that, I want to do distraction free before I go into the warehouse and everyone starts bringing me their problems. But as far as what I'm reading, it's really dependent on whatever my biggest challenges are at the time. So like, for a while, my biggest challenge was just leadership. It's like, okay, how do I motivate a team of people to kind of get behind a vision? So I read a bunch of books on leadership, and then I went deep on like lean manufacturing, the whole lean concept, and read and watched a bunch of YouTube videos, read the Toyota Way, read a bunch of stuff like that. And so kind of organized my business around that. And we're still doing that to this day. But, but now it's like, there's not really, but now like my crisis is like, I'm like thinking far in the future. I'm like, there's no fires to put out in the day to day. Really. It's like the crisis is where are we going? So it's like forward thinking. So actually I felt like getting ready for Shark Tank, like my idea factory kind of shut down. It's like, I was so kind of stressed and anxious for so long that all my creativity had kind of gone away. And so now I'm trying to open my mind back up to more ideas. And so, like last week I read a book on AI and the impacts it might have on the future. And I'm reading a book about blockchain right now and alternative, technologies that are coming out, and trying to imagine, hey, how would that play a part in my business? What can we do maybe to take advantage of this or prepare ourselves? How is it changing the world? Trying to get back into the mindset of looking at kind of the macro and what's coming up. But if I ever, so I'm typically reading business books, but then my guilty pleasure is I like to read nonfiction exploration and adventure books. So if there's a book written about an Everest climb gone wrong, I've probably read it.
So Endurance. Have you read Endurance?
I was going to say that's my number one. That's the only book I've read like 3 times. I don't think
my man.
Antarctic exploration. I love all it because it's stuff I'll probably never do. I'm cool with like getting out in the wilderness and hiking some trails, but I'm not going to put my life at risk with the family, and I'm not going to go climb Everest and probably die. It's like,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I'll read books about other people that have, and I find it really inspiring. So,
Okay. So one that is not about an Antarctic adventure as Shackleton was pursuing, that I think you would really, really love. Have you read Boys in the Boat? About
I
the
never heard
third.
of it.
Okay, you got to check it out. It's about the 36 or 38. Let me see if I've got it here. It's somewhere. Uh, Olympic crew team. They were not supposed to win, and that was Hitler's Olympics, which I think that was 38, 36, and it was a crew team that was put together from the University of Washington, which now the Washington crew, which I knew nothing about crew before I read this book, had no interest in crew. You read this book, man, I can tell you will love it. As a matter of fact, I tell you what, as a thank you for you doing this podcast, I'm sending you a copy of Boys in the Boat, and you tell me what you think later.
All right.
It's because of so I've got this Vitruvian reading list right now where I'm reading a book a week for the entire year, and right now Endurance and Boys in the Boat are my top two of all that I've read this year. I know you'll like it, so I'm going to send you a copy of that as a thank you.
All right, cool. Thank you.
You bet, brother. Well, listen, man, I want to be respectful of your time. Aaron, this has been so much fun, man. And I owe Bo a lunch, a dinner. Maybe I owe him a book for putting this together. Thanks for making the time, man. I wish you the absolute best. I don't want this to be our last conversation. I want to do anything I can to help and support you, your business. And just, man, I'm grateful. Thank you and congratulations on becoming not only a bike titan, but you are a Texas Titan, man, and it's well deserved.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. It was really fun to be on here.
All right, brother. Well, sit tight.